Hi, this is Mike Carruthers of the Storytelling Project. In what is probably my favorite interview to date, Michael McCain shares with me how he became Santa. One look at Michael and you know he was born to the role. Enjoy.
Okay, we're ready to begin. So, what's your name again?
Michael McCain.
And Michael, I've heard that you sometimes play Santa Claus. I mean, how could that be possible?
Well, that's a good question. I suppose you could call me an accidental Santa Claus, because although I've had a beard all my life, as a matter of fact, they wouldn't let me go back to grade 12, my grade 12 year, because I'd grown a beard over the summer. But that's another story. And I went white in my mid-30s. I like to say it was caused by two daughters, but as my mom was whiter than I am by the time she was 21, I suppose genes played a factor in that respect. And although I've worked with children all my life, I've taught swimming, gymnastics, canoeing, kayaking, Sunday school, playing Santa Claus had never entered my mind.
So tell me about the first time you got to be Santa.
Well,
Tell me your story.
my wife ran a daycare, and one of our daycare parents got together with her brothers and sisters' families on Christmas Eve for a real family Christmas. And to get the little ones to go to bed, one of the fathers would dress up as Santa Claus and hand out Christmas Eve presents, brand new pajamas. And all the little ones would happily hop into their pajamas and go off to bed and leave the adults with a bit of adult time on Christmas Eve. This had gone really, really well up until the previous year when her youngest was 4 years old. And when Santa arrived, he realized that one of the dads was missing. So Melanie asked me if I'd play Santa Claus. She said, "You can use my suit and you can use our fake beard over yours so that he won't recognize you." And I thought about it for a short time and thought, sure, why not? So I showed up and sat on the Santa chair, and I really only had to have the first 2-year-old girl sit on my lap with her big eyes looking up at Santa Claus, and I was hooked. And the night went off almost without a hitch. Melanie's little boy sat on my lap, and all he saw was Santa Claus, and all the dads gathered around. And all was good, with the exception that his eyes went to my hands, and he saw the rings I had on, and he recognized them, and he just became fixated on these rings. But he couldn't figure out where he'd seen them before. And we'd been playing in our family room that afternoon, but he never did put two and two together. So it was a success, and Melanie was thrilled and asked me to do it again next year.
So how many years ago was that?
That was 1996.
Right.
Yeah.
And so how did it take off from there?
Well, of course, as soon as the other daycare moms heard what we've cooked up, the requests began to come in, and soon I was doing a number of Christmas Eve visits. And then a couple of years later, Gail started daycaring a little one of a woman who ran the tourist bureau for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge. And she asked me if I would do her corporate party. So I became the Santa Claus for the Maple Ridge Tourist Bureau's corporate party, and I left after doing the first year with 4 requests to do corporate parties for other businesses. And the Santa experience was expanding.
I talked to you about this before. I understand that you've actually got a Santa agent.
Yes. Now, in 2002, I was walking through Brentwood doing some shopping when I was tugged on the sleeve by a woman, and she said, "Are you a professional Santa?" And I said, "Well, to friends." She said, "Oh, you'd make a great Santa. You need to talk to Jack Scott. He places Santas in all the big events in Vancouver." And I said, "Well, not this year. I just had lost my mom And I said, I'm not doing anything this year, but, maybe next year. And I gave her my card. Well, in June of 2003, Jack Scott called me. We had coffee at Starbucks in Maple Ridge, and he was so convinced that I would be a good Santa Claus that he wanted to place me at Canada Place. He said, ordinarily, I would place one of my more experienced Santa Clauses, but the Santa Claus that was there had been given the offer to be Santa Claus in Japan. And so he needed to put someone in that place, and he thought I would do well. So in 2003, I sat down in the Santa chair at Canada Place in a Santa suit that Jack Scott had loaned me, and that expanded my portrayal incredibly. I had a much more international experience than I had had in Maple Ridge, and I must admit was challenged at times to find the right responses. But one of the real assets that I had was going back shortly after I became Santa Claus to family and friends. I used to dress up as Santa Claus and greet my daughter who came home from back east each Christmas out at YVR at the airport. So I was out at the airport and I noticed a fellow deplaned from another flight, and I commented to my wife, I said, there is a real Santa Claus. Like head to toe, he fit my image of what Santa Claus should look like. And I thought nothing more of it. He disappeared into the crowds. And then just before I was about to greet Colleen, he was standing in front of me. And he said, I know you're busy, but I just wanted to give you this. And he handed me his card. And on the card, it simply said, Santa Tom Kleiner, Santas Around the Globe. So that night, when I got home, I hopped on the computer and looked up Santas across the globe. It was a worldwide community of Santa Clauses, over 700 of them. Some new Santas similar to myself, some with 30, 40 years experience. And for a fellow who was looking to always improve his Santa portrayal, this was just the thing. So I didn't post for well over a year. I just read what was being said and looked at each one of the responses and learned.
One thing you told me about, which I thought was really cool, that maybe made you such a special Santa, was when you were working at Canada Place, you learned how to say Merry Christmas. Was that in different languages?
Well, as I said, when I was sort of challenged by some of these responses, I decided that I would keep a pad of paper and a pencil with me, and anytime that I heard something or got a question or an experience that, caught my fancy, I would write it down, and then at a later date, I would look to develop a compassionate or even humorous answer to these things. And I did notice that so often I would, at Canada Place, get tourists or immigrant families that would come to visit me. And the little boy or girl would sit up on my lap, and they'd usually speak some English. And quite often parents would be there, and they'd know a few words themselves. But so often the grandparents stood in the background, and they just stared into space, not recognizing a thing that was being said. What I found was, if I could say Merry Christmas to them in their language, their eyes lit up just like the little ones on my lap. And so I started asking each group that spoke with an accent where they were from. And if I didn't know, I'd ask them how they said Merry Christmas in their language and also what they called Santa Claus. Now, over the years, I've learned how to say Merry Christmas in 118 languages, and there's not many people that can get by me without me wishing them Merry Christmas. Yeah.
Then you went up to Grouse Mountain, I heard?
Yes, I spent a number of years up at Grouse Mountain, and from a Santa perspective,
That's the top of the hill.
it is literally the top of the hill. You can't get a better location. You've got the snow, and I had my own little workshop up there. We have reindeer, and I had almost a totally free reign up there, so that if there was nobody coming to the workshop, if it was quiet, we've got an 8,000 square foot skating rink right in front of my workshop. I could put on a set of skates and go skating with the people that were out enjoying the rink. If you could call it skating, you'd go 6 feet, you'd be crowded by a group of 3 or 4 people or more. You'd get a picture taken, you'd go another 8 feet. I also could strap on a set of skis and ski the slopes, which I did, but again, it was sort of diagonally across the slope, stop, group of pictures, diagonally across the slope, and repeat. But it was fun. And we had sleigh rides, and I could go on sleigh rides. When it was quiet, I would wander through the chalet and greet people. Yeah, a fun time.
So the big gig you've had, though, and that's a great gig, but you've had the steady gig of being the Brentwood Santa?
Yes. When Canada Place shut down, first because they were joining the convention center to Canada Place, it was, the construction area was in an area that we did our Santa. They stopped having Santa that year, and then the following year it was the Olympics, and they were the media center, and they couldn't have Santa Claus, and I left and went to Brentwood, and I think this will be my 9th year at Brentwood.
So having said this, your 9th year at Brentwood, obviously 2020 is a whole different experience now. How will you be doing Santa this fall at Brentwood? I guess it's hard to have the kids in your lap this year.
Yes. Christmas with Santa Claus is going to be like no other that we've ever experienced. And there won't be any children sitting on my lap this year. However, we are working on just how we'll be able to have Santa visits. And most probably, it will be set up so that we're able to be socially distanced. It hasn't been finalized, but we've been looking at using a workshop-like atmosphere with a Santa workbench, toys that's, say, 6 or 8 feet long, with Santa at one end and families or children at the other. Yeah.
Are you doing any virtual Santas at all?
Yes. I've already done a virtual, or filmed a virtual visit with for the Treasures of Christmas. That's Crossroads Hospice's annual event, and this year they've had to go virtual. So I've already filmed a little segment for that, and have arranged to do a couple of virtual visits with children. So we will be doing some. But basically, when you start out at 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning and you go to 7 or 8 o'clock at night at Brentwood, there's not a lot of time left for me to do other things in that respect, so I'm not doing much of that.
I guess my last question is, and thank you, Mike, this has been wonderful hearing about this, is what's the best part of being Santa?
It's listening to the children. You know, they come and tell me their dreams and their wishes, and you never know what it is they're going to ask for. Santa's got to be sharp, I have to admit. As an example, I had a little boy on my lap who said, "All I want for Christmas is a necklace for my mummy." Now, and I congratulated on thinking of somebody else other than himself, but thought to myself, how is this going to work? I've just been told a secret wish of what mummy's supposed to get, and if mummy doesn't get this, Santa's a crud. So I thankfully had my piece of paper and pencil handy, and as soon as the little boy hopped off my lap, I jotted something down on a piece of paper and handed it to one of my elves and said, "You've got to give this to the mum as soon as you can." So hopefully she got a necklace that year for Christmas. Or I had a little boy who said, "All I want for Christmas is for you to give my daddy a job." And I said, "What makes you think your dad would want a job from Santa Claus?" He said, "I heard my mummy and daddy talking last night, and he said that he'd go to the North Pole if somebody would give him a job. And who did he think of? Santa Claus. So yes, it's a lot of fun. And yet, you don't always get the easy questions either. So you will get little ones who sit on your lap and say, all I want you to do is to cure my mummy's cancer. Or I always remember little Andy, I'll call him, sat on my lap at Canada Place, and when I asked him what he wanted for Christmas, he whispered in my ear, I'd want my father to stop beating me. You know, what's a Santa to do in a situation like that? And yet Santa has to have an answer for children of some sort. And so I turned to the little boy and I said, now, you have to understand that Santa, in essence, is a toy maker. And my magic extends to making enough toys for all the boys and girls around the world and getting to them in one night. But some things I just can't manufacture in a toy shop. But I tell you what I'll do. If you'd like, when I get home to the North Pole tonight, I'll gather all the elves together and Mrs. Claus and myself in the Great Hall, and we'll say a little prayer that you get that wish. And at least then the child understands that I've listened to what he has to say and that I'm going to do something. But those can be really difficult. And there are times when you sort of have to sit back and recompose yourself before the next little one hops on your lap.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, thank you for bringing a little bit of Christmas into this wet, damp fall morning. It's a big pleasure to speak with you. Thank you.
You're welcome.